The wind didn't just blow through the jagged teeth of the Sawtooth Range. It screamed, carrying the bitter, metallic scent of an early snow. It was late October, the time of year when the high country decided whether it would merely test a man or kill him outright. Thaddeus Bear Thorne had stopped fearing the mountain's judgment a decade ago. He sat astride his mule, Barnaby, watching the valley floor of Iron Ridge sprawl out below him like a stain on a pristine tablecloth. Thorne was a man carved from the same granite as the peaks behind him, broad-shouldered, bearded in a thicket of iron gray, and possessing eyes that had seen too much and now preferred to see nothing at all. His cabin, a fortress of pine logs and mud chinking, sat 4 miles up the switchbacks, isolated in a grove of shivering aspens. It was his sanctuary. Since he had buried his wife, Martha, and their infant son, Samuel, beneath the twin pines near the creek, silence had been his only trusted kin. Today, however, the silence had to be broken. The monthly supply run to Iron Ridge was a penance he endured with gritted teeth. He needed coffee, salt, ammunition, and flour. He needed to be invisible. He guided Barnaby down the treacherous scree, the mule picking its way with the sure-footedness of a mountain goat. As they descended, the air grew thicker, heavier with the smell of coal smoke and unwashed humanity. Iron Ridge was a boomtown that had already busted, clinging to existence through stubbornness and vice. Thaddeus tied Barnaby outside Miller's mercantile. He spoke only in grunts and nods to Old Man Miller, slapping coins onto the counter and ignoring the way the shopkeeper's eyes darted nervously toward the scar running down Thaddeus's cheek. Supplies loaded, Thaddeus knew he should leave. The clouds were bruising purple over the peaks, promising a storm. But the devil was thirsty. It wasn't a thirst for liquor, not really. It was a thirst for the numbness that a glass of rot-gut whiskey provided, a brief respite from the ghosts that haunted his empty cabin. He pushed through the swinging doors of the Gilded Spade. The saloon smelled of stale beer, sawdust, and despair. Thaddeus took his usual spot at the far end of the bar, back to the wall, nursing a glass of amber fire. He was halfway through it when the shouting began. $20! That's all I'm asking. The voice was ragged, wet with tears and gin. Thaddeus didn't turn. It was the usual sad song of the frontier, a prospector selling his claim or a cowboy selling his saddle. Look at her, she's sturdy, she can work, she don't eat much. That stopped the glass halfway to Thaddeus's lips. The room, previously buzzing with the low hum of conversation and the tinny sound of a piano, fell deathly silent. Thaddeus turned. In the center of the room stood a man who looked like a scarecrow stuffed with trembling straw. His clothes were rags, his face a map of broken veins. But it was the small figure beside him that froze the blood in Thaddeus's veins. A girl, maybe 9 years old. She was a waif, thin as a willow switch, wearing a dress made of flour sacks that hung on her frame like a shroud. Her hair was a matted nest of dark curls, and her face, smudged with dirt, held eyes of such piercing, terrifying blue that they seemed to burn. She clutched a dirty rag doll to her chest, her knuckles white. "Silas, you can't be serious," the barkeep growled, wiping a glass. "Go home and sleep it off." "Got no home!" the man, Silas, shrieked. "Bank took the farm. Got no horse. Need a horse to get to the mines in Nevada. $20 buys a horse. She's dead weight." The girl didn't cry. She didn't move. She just stared at the floorboards, as if wishing she could dissolve into the sawdust. "I'll give you 10, a voice sneered from the corner. Thaddeus's eyes shifted. It was Jasper Reed, a man who dealt in cards, cattle, and things that weren't his. He wore a suit that was too clean, and a smile that was too sharp. "She's a bit scrawny," Reed continued, standing up and circling the girl like one would inspect a mule. "But I suppose she can scrub floors at the brothel until she's old enough to earn her keep upstairs." Silas wavered, looking between Reed and the girl. 20, he whispered weakly. 15, Reed countered, pulling a gold coin from his vest. "And that's charity." The girl flinched as Reed reached out to touch her chin. Thaddeus felt a roar build in his chest, a sound so loud he thought it would shatter his ribs. He remembered Samuel. He remembered the fever that took him. He remembered the helplessness. "I'll take her." The voice was deep, scraping like gravel over steel. Every head turned toward the giant in the shadows. Thaddeus stood up. He seemed to unfold, rising higher and higher until he loomed over the room. He walked to the center of the floor, the spurs on his boots chiming like funeral bells. "You?" Silas blinked, trying to focus. $20, Thaddeus said. He reached into his duster and pulled out his pouch. It was everything he had left for the winter. He poured the silver coins onto a poker table. They clattered loudly in the silence. "Done!" Silas gasped, scrambling for the money like a starving rat. "Wait a minute." Reed stepped forward, his hand drifting toward his hip. "We were negotiating." Thaddeus turned his head slowly. He looked at Reed with the indifference of a bear looking at a yapping dog. "Transaction's done." Reed hesitated. He looked at the size of Thaddeus, then at the heavy hunting knife sheathed at his belt. He stepped back, a sneer curling his lip. "Suit yourself, mountain man. You're paying double what she's worth." Silas had the money. He didn't look at his daughter. He ran for the door, the coins jingling in his pocket, trading his own flesh and blood for a gamble in Nevada. Thaddeus looked down. The girl hadn't moved. "What's your name, child?" he asked, his voice rough. She looked up. Fear was there, yes, but also a spark of defiance. "Lily," she whispered. "Well, Lily," Thaddeus said, feeling the weight of the entire room pressing on him. "Let's go." The journey up the mountain was a silent agony. Thaddeus walked, leading Barnaby, while Lily sat perched atop the supply sacks, clutching her rag doll. She was so light it terrified him. Why had he done this? He was a hermit. He barely kept himself alive. What did he know of raising a girl? He had failed his own son. Surely he would fail her too. "You cold?" he asked after an hour. The wind was picking up, stripping the last gold leaves from the aspens. She nodded once, shivering. Thaddeus stopped. He unbuckled his heavy wool coat and wrapped it around her. It swallowed her whole, the sleeves hanging a foot past her hands. She looked like a turtle retreating into a shell. "We'll be there by dark," he promised. They arrived as the first snowflakes began to hiss against the lantern glass. The cabin was dark and cold. Thaddeus lifted her down. She was stiff from the ride, and ushered her inside. He moved with practiced efficiency, lighting the kerosene lamp and stoking the embers in the hearth until a roaring fire pushed back the shadows. "Sit," he pointed to the rough-hewn chair by the table. Lily sat. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the drying herbs, the bare skin rug, the single bunk in the corner. Where will you sleep?" she asked, her voice trembling. Thaddeus looked at the bunk. "That's yours. I sleep by the fire. Always have." It was a lie, but a necessary one. He saw the tension leave her shoulders, just a fraction. He made a stew of venison jerky and potatoes. He watched her eat. She didn't wolf it down like a savage. She ate with a terrifying precision, saving every crumb as if she didn't know when the next meal would come. "My pa." "He said you'd eat me," she said suddenly, staring into her bowl. Thaddeus choked on his coffee. "He what?" "He said mountain men eat children, make soup out of their bones." Thaddeus set his cup down hard. "Your pa was a liar and a fool. I don't eat children, Lily. I don't hurt them neither. You're safe here. Nobody gets through that door unless I say so. Not wolves, not men, not the devil himself." She looked at him, searching for the lie. When she didn't find one, she took another bite of stew. Trust is not built in a day. It is built in the quiet moments between survival. The first winter was brutal. The snow piled 6 feet deep against the walls. For weeks, they were trapped in the small cabin. It should have been maddening, but instead, it became an education. Thaddeus realized quickly that Lily wasn't just a victim. She was a survivor. "You hold the knife like this," Thaddeus showed her one evening, handing her a paring, knife and a block of cedar. "Whittle away from yourself. Always away." She mimicked him, her tongue poking from the corner of her mouth in concentration. She carved a crude horse. It looked more like a potato with legs, but Thaddeus praised it like it was a Michelangelo. He taught her to read the wind. North wind brings snow. East wind brings rain. South wind brings warmth, but it's a liar in February. He taught her letters using charcoal on the back of a shovel blade. She was ravenous for knowledge. She learned to read from his old, battered King James Bible, tracing the words until her fingers were black with soot. One afternoon in March, a warm Chinook wind melted the crust of the snow. Thaddeus took her to the clearing behind the cabin. He set up a tin can on a fence post. He handed her the .22 rifle. It was heavy for her, but he made her hold it. This ain't a toy, Lily. It's a tool, just like the axe or the stove. You treat it with respect. It keeps you alive. You treat it careless. It'll kill you. I'm scared of it, she admitted. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Now, tuck it into your shoulder. Breathe out. Squeeze. Don't pull. Crack. The dirt kicked up 5 feet to the left. Again. Crack. 3 feet to the right. Again. Ping. The can danced off the post. Lily dropped the rifle, her mouth agape. Then, a smile broke across her face, the first real smile Thaddeus had seen. It was like the sun breaking through a thunderhead. I got it! Bear! I got it! She called him Bear now. It fit him better than Thaddeus. You did good, little bit, he grunted, hiding his own smile in his beard. You did good. Spring brought mud, wildflowers, and trouble. Thaddeus and Lily were planting the vegetable garden when the sound of hooves echoed up the canyon. Thaddeus immediately shoved Lily behind him, his hand going to the Colt Navy revolver at his hip. 3 riders emerged from the tree line. It was Sheriff Elias Miller and 2 women from the Iron Ridge Church League. Afternoon, Thaddeus, the sheriff called out, keeping his hands visible. Miller was a good man, tired and overworked, trying to keep law in a lawless land. Sheriff, Thaddeus nodded. You're far from town. We're here for the girl, one of the women snapped. She was Mrs. Gable, a woman who wore her piety like a weapon. It's untoward, Mr. Thorne. A bachelor living alone with a young girl. It's scandalous. Lily peeked out from behind Thaddeus's leg. She was wearing a buckskin tunic Thaddeus had sewn for her, her hair braided tight. She looked healthy, strong, and wild. She's fed, Thaddeus rumbled. She's warm. She's safe. She needs a mother, Mrs. Gable insisted. She needs civilization. We have arranged a spot for her at the orphanage in Denver. Orphanage? Lily stepped out, her small fists clenched. I ain't an orphan. I got a pa. Mrs. Gable looked down her nose. Your father sold you, child. This man bought you like a mule. It's not right. He didn't buy me to work, Lily shouted, her voice echoing off the rocks. He bought me so I wouldn't go with Jasper Reed. He saved me. The sheriff looked at Thaddeus, eyebrows raised. Reed was involved? He was bidding, Thaddeus said quietly. You know what happens to girls Reed gets his hands on, Elias? The sheriff's face darkened. He spat into the dirt. I do. Sheriff, Mrs. Gable gasped. You cannot leave her here. It is legally ambiguous at best. I'm staying, Lily declared, grabbing Thaddeus's hand. The contact startled him, but he squeezed back. Bear teaches me to read. He teaches me to shoot. He gives me the big piece of meat at supper. I ain't going. The sheriff sighed, rubbing his temples. Mrs. Gable, the girl looks healthy. I can't drag her kicking and screaming down the mountain without cause. Thaddeus, you bring her to town once a month. Let the doc check her. Let the reverend speak to her. If I see one sign of neglect, one sign of anything else, I'll come back with a posse. Understood? Understood, Thaddeus said. As they rode away, Mrs. Gable casting angry glances back, Thaddeus looked down at Lily. You stood up to him. You stood up for me first, she said simply. The second winter was worse. It wasn't the snow. It was the hunger. The elk herds had moved south early. The rabbits were scarce. By January, the root cellar was looking frighteningly empty. Thaddeus began rationing. He gave Lily full portions and took half for himself, claiming he wasn't hungry. She knew he was lying, but he wouldn't hear a word of it. Then came the wolves. A pack of timber wolves, starving and desperate, moved into the valley. They were massive gray ghosts that circled the cabin at night, their howls making the timbers vibrate. One night, the temperature dropped to 20 below. Thaddeus was feverish. A frantic infection from a wood-splitting accident on his leg had left him bedridden. He was burning up, delirious, calling out for his dead wife. Lily, now 11, was in charge. She changed his bandages, boiled willow bark for the pain, and kept the fire fed. Around midnight, a crash shook the cabin. Lily grabbed the .22 rifle. A wolf, crazed by hunger, had thrown itself through the window shutter. Glass shattered. A snout, wet and snarling, pushed through the broken pane. Thaddeus groaned on the bunk, trying to rise, but he was too weak. Get back! Lily screamed. The wolf scrambled, its claws tearing at the wood, trying to widen the hole. Behind it, More yellow eyes glowed in the darkness. Lily didn't tremble this time. She remembered the breathing. Breathe out. Squeeze. She leveled the rifle at the thrashing beast. Bang! The wolf yelped and fell back into the snow, but another leaped at the opening immediately. Lily reloaded. Her hands moved with the muscle memory. Thaddeus had drilled into her. She fired again, and again. She spent the entire night at the window, firing into the darkness whenever eyes appeared, screaming at them to leave her father alone. When dawn broke, silence returned to the mountain. Thaddeus woke 2 days later, the fever broken. He found Lily asleep in the chair by the door, the rifle across her lap. Outside, 3 dead wolves lay frozen in the crimson snow. He looked at the carnage, then at the sleeping girl. She wasn't a waif anymore. She was a warrior. Spring brought the melting of snow and the return of the past. Thaddeus and Lily went to town for supplies. They were laughing, talking about the garden, when Sheriff Miller intercepted them. He looked grim. "Thaddeus, you need to come with me. To the courthouse." "Why?" "Judge Alistair Blackwood is in town, and he's got a petition on his desk." Inside the brick courthouse, the air was stifling. Sitting in the front row, looking smug and polished, was Jasper Reed. "This man," Reed stood up, gesturing theatrically to Thaddeus, "stole my property. I had a verbal contract with Silas Vance. The girl was to be indentured to me for debts owed. Mr. Thorne interfered with a lawful transaction." Judge Blackwood, a man with a face like a dried apple, looked over his spectacles. "Mr. Thorne, do you have adoption papers?" "I have a grave out back where I buried her doubts," Thaddeus rumbled. "That's all the paper I need." "Don't be insolent," the judge snapped. "The law requires documentation. Mr. Reed claims prior right. He has witnesses." 2 rough-looking drifters nodded from the back. "We heard it, Judge. Silas promised the girl to Reed. It was a lie, a bought and paid-for lie." "This is absurd," Thaddeus roared. "He wants to sell her. I want to employ her." Reed smoothed his lapels. "She will be fed and housed, unlike living in a hovel with a wild man." The judge banged his gavel. "Without documentation, the law favors the original creditor. I am inclined to grant custody to Mr. Reed until the debt is settled." Lily screamed. Thaddeus moved to grab her, and 2 deputies restrained him. "Wait!" The voice came from the back of the room. A couple, dressed in fine city clothes, stood up. They had been watching quietly. "Who are you?" Judge Blackwood asked. "I am Dr. Harrison Wells, and this is my wife, Clara. We are from Denver." The doctor walked forward. "We have been searching for our niece for 3 years. She was taken by raiders. We heard rumors of a man buying children in these parts." He turned to Reed. "We investigated you, Mr. Reed. We know about the girls you employ. We know about the one who died last winter in your care." The room gasped. Reed lost his smile. "That's slander." "I have the death certificate." Dr. Wells slammed a paper on the judge's bench. "Signed by the coroner in Leadville, malnutrition and abuse." The judge read the paper. His face turned purple. He looked at Reed. "Is this true?" "It was an accident," Reed stammered. "Sheriff," the judge barked, "arrest Mr. Reed for inquiry into manslaughter. Get him out of my sight." As Reed was dragged away, kicking and cursing, the judge turned to Thaddeus. "Mr. Thorne, you still lack papers." Dr. Wells stepped in. "Your Honor, if I may, my wife and I, we see how this girl looks at Mr. Thorne. We see a healthy, spirited child. We would be happy to sponsor the legal fees to formalize this adoption. Immediately." The judge looked at Lily. "Child, step forward." Lily walked to the bench. She looked small against the high wood, but her chin was high. "Who do you want to belong to?" the judge asked. "I don't belong to nobody," Lily said fiercely. "I ain't a horse. But Bear, Thaddeus, he's my papa. He didn't buy me, he saved me. And if you try to take me, I'll run back to the mountain. I know the trails better than your deputies. You'll never find me." The judge stared at her. Then a rare, dry chuckle escaped his lips. "Case dismissed. Custody granted to Thaddeus Thorne, pending paperwork funded by Dr. Wells." 5 years later, Thaddeus sat on the porch, whittling. His hair was white now, his movements slower. Lily was 16. She was beautiful, sharp, and kind. She was the schoolteacher in Iron Ridge now, riding down the mountain every morning on Barnaby's foal, a mule named Star. She rode up the trail, waving an envelope. "Letter came," she said, hopping off the mule. From Nevada. They sat together as she opened it. It was dirty, stained with whiskey and blood. Lily, I don't expect you to read this. I'm dying. Lung fever. Just wanted to say, I watched you. I came back a year ago, hid in the tree line. I saw you shooting that rifle. I saw you laughing with that big bear of a man. I sold you because I was weak, but it was the only right thing I ever did. He made you strong. He made you who you were supposed to be. I ain't asking for forgiveness. Just wanted you to know, I'm glad I sold you. Silas Lily read it twice. She didn't cry. She folded the paper and looked at the sunset painting the peaks in fire and gold. You okay? Thaddeus asked, his hand resting on her shoulder. Yeah, she said softly. She crumpled the letter and tossed it into the fireplace inside. She watched it burn until it was nothing but ash. She turned back to Thaddeus, her eyes shining with that fierce blue light. Supper's ready, Papa. Thaddeus smiled, the scar on his cheek crinkling. Coming, daughter. The wind howled through the peaks, but inside the cabin there was only warmth.